Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, debt slaves, hearse, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, free thinkers. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And let's go back to talking about automation, driverless cars, and robotics. And as I'm kind of doing a little mini series on that right now. And this is the best story of all, and that's the whole idea that perhaps this whole driverless vehicle thing is getting hyped considerably. And I know I've been following this for a while, and I've been very uh, gullible to a certain extent because people like Mish Shedlock, who I respect a lot, has been talking about the idea that a lot of jobs are going to be replaced in the very near future by robotics, including driverless vehicles. And I think for the most part, we are going to see these huge changes in a lot of different kinds of repetitive sort of jobs, including blue collar and white collar jobs that will be replaced by different forms of automation that are getting more sophisticated in a lot of robotics. And we're going to see that certainly in other sectors, retail sectors and accounting, and on and on and on. But this whole idea of driverless cars is a lot more complicated, and this article confirms what we should all know, that a lot of this is hype. And so this has a lot of tie-ins because I've had a lot of discussions with a couple of my regular viewers, including Mankind Global Network, most notably about the idea of driverless cars, being a little more skeptical about how soon they'll come down the road. But for the most part, most of the media you see out there talks about how the fact that these driverless cars are right around the corner, 5 to 10 years, and this is according to certainly a lot of the automakers and a lot of so-called visionaries and whatnot. But it turns out there's a lot more to it. So let's get to this article that I'm referencing. I'll of course post it down below. But all these big Silicon Valley gurus, for one, are really big on this new technology, self-driving vehicles, and that includes Elon Musk and Tesla, of course, and John Zimmer, co-founder of Lyft, who says quote, by 2025, private car ownership will all but end in major U.S. cities, unquote. Pretty dramatic 10 years from now that there won't even be cars in cities. Travis Kalanick of Uber is also ballyhooing the coming of driverless cars. And then, of course, the CEO of Ford says, quote, a fleet of auto self-driving cars will operate as taxis in a major U.S. city by 2021. So once again, that's only, 5-6 years away. He's talking about all taxis being driverless vehicles in a major U.S. city. And as it turns out, and this sounds a lot more sober to me, and that's the Society of Automotive Engineers talks about 5 levels when it comes to automation and the progress towards driverless cars. And they talk about 1, which is driver assistance. Of course, we see that a lot with GPS and all that sort of thing in cars now. And 2 is partial automation, and we see that with a lot of car functions, including parallel parking, being partially automated. And then 3 will be conditional automation that will be more adaptive, and we're seeing a lot of more headway in that area. And then in high automation, number 4, we're seeing a lot of headway in that general direction as well. And as the scientists point out, it's easy to get to that first 80% of having fully automated self-driving cars, but getting to that last 20% is very, very hard. That's when you get to step number 5, full automation, and by all standards set by the Society of Automotive Engineers, that we will not see self-driving vehicles probably even in our lifetimes. And so all this hype about seeing it in 5 years or seeing it in 10 years is very exaggerated. Automation will be introduced in increments, and I tend to agree with that. The idea that we're going to have fully self-driving, fully automated cars in 5 years just seems really hard to grasp, particularly when we look at all these technologies. It's generally done in increments, and we see this with cell phones and televisions, for example. All these different developments and progress that's been made in the technology of televisions. Phones has been incremental. It's something that we've noticed so that there was not this all of a sudden this dramatic changeover. It was incremental, and we hardly even noticed where we've gotten to and where we used to be. And I would imagine that would be the same with automated cars. We'll see it more incrementally, but so that by the time it does happen, it won't be so dramatic. But ultimately, sure, we could see these dire predictions of 4 million professional driving jobs being eliminated by robotics and automation, self-driving vehicles at some point, but probably not in the next 5 or 10 years as they're discussing now, and maybe not very soon after that. So there have been Senate hearings on this as well, and they're talking about the fact that what kind of problems they're going to have with these vehicles, and they're the ones that everyone expects and talks about. How you compensate for weather, how you compensate for interaction with other technologies. We have so many wireless technologies, electronic technologies, digital technologies, everything tied into the grid and computerization, that the interaction of these technologies will be complicated. And then the possibility of interference. There's a possibility that people will interfere with self-driving vehicles. So it's more complicated. So what a great follow-up to all the videos I've done about the idea of self-driving vehicles and automation having a huge impact in the future. I'd like to come across these articles a little more sober. I'm useful, don't you be one too?